The silence of mind healing marks the greatest step in the spiritual unfolding of intelligence in the human race since the birth of music and painting several centuries ago. As music and painting awaken the light in man in their day to give birth to a higher culture, so is the science of mind command over motion hastening man towards his illumining in this day. It has already lifted the whole human race one more rung up the ladder, which reaches into the high heavens of omniscience. But the heavens are high, the ladder is long, and the human race is on its lower rungs. This epochal mind healing movement is in its infancy, however, and must grow logically and slowly to be strong like an oak. Like the surgeon's scalpel, which saves many lives, it can cut both ways. It can kill when in the hands of the unknowing, as well as it can save when knowledge guides it. That is the position of this God power, which one illumined woman placed into dynamic practice only half a century ago. It is true that she was instantly healed of fever, which might have caused her death. It is true that Jesus instantly healed men who were near death with leprosy and other dangerous ills. His healings were not miracles, even though they seemed to transcend nature's normal processes. He had a power which no man has ever had, nor can even comprehend. It is true also that Jesus knew why and how he healed. Is it true that the thousands of science of mind healers of today know what Jesus knew, which alone gave him the power to reverse the death process to life? Is it true that they even comprehend what Jesus knew? It is true that Jesus said, "What I do, you can likewise do." But is it true that one can do what Jesus could do without knowing what Jesus knew and have his power? Well, that was a little bit of a confusing paragraph, and it should probably be read again. Paderewski could have said to man, "What I do, you can also do," and it would be just as true. But is it true that any man can do what Paderewski could do without knowing what Paderewski knew and gave a whole life in preparation for? Perhaps it is right here in the answer to these questions that the mind healing movement is not the mighty power that it should be after half a century of growth. By this time, the mind healer should have the status of spiritual doctor and be working in close cooperation with the medical doctor, surgeon, chiropractor, osteopath, and specialist, each one using a special knowledge in cooperation with the other. However, instead of that mutual cooperation, we have a pronounced antagonism born of misunderstanding of the great value of the one to the other. Lack of basic knowledge always brings a lack of appreciation and respect. In our world of today, one surgeon, one doctor, one nurse are worth more in a hospital or on a battlefield than 10,000 mind healers. This is not as it should be. Each should be of equal value. The mind doctor is vitally needed as a great forward step in the unfoldment of spiritual man. The science of mind healing should be as universally accepted as the science of medicine and surgery. This is not the status today, for if it became imperative that either one or the other had to be eliminated from human practice by edict of law, the choice would overwhelmingly be in favor of retaining the doctors of medicine and surgery. When perfect unity marries the two branches of healing of unbalanced bodies, which have become unbalanced by unbalanced mind decisions and actions, the mighty power which belongs to both will come as an epochal step forward in mind control of body, but not until. Such a marriage would be a great spiritual step in the unfolding of man. The present antagonism which exists between these two benefactors of the race must undergo a complete transformation because they are not a separately opposed two. They are one, and there would be no reason for antagonism if logic and common sense were applied to the principle. Every illness of man is both mental and physical. Simultaneously, there is no ill of man which is just of body alone or just mind alone. The physical doctor is trained to cure illness of bodies. His basic assumption is that bodies are composed of chemical elements which affect each other favorably or unfavorably, as there may be lack or oversupply, or of foreign elements which do not belong to the human formula. Upon this assumption, he has long treated bodies as he would treat elements in laboratories. He thus gives pills and liquids to make up deficiencies, or dissolve excesses, or destroy foreign elements or germs which have illegitimately trespassed upon the body normalcy. It has never been a part of the basic foundation of medical world to think of mind in relation to body ailments. A great many of the very wise medical practitioners are becoming strongly aware of the mind relation to body ills, however, and are taking it very seriously into consideration in their diagnosis. Unfortunately, this recognition of mind and body relationship as the cause of all ills is not so generously shared by mind doctors. If each branch of healers reached widely over into each other's fields of interest, as a husband and wife reach over into the home and business affairs, the ideal of maximum help for humans in distress could be reached. Without that mutual sharing in a strictly mutual science, the medical and surgical science will grow stronger and the mind science weaker. Both are vitally needed, however, but only as a united one and not as a separate and antagonistic two. The mind healer is trained to cure illnesses of the body upon the assumption that mind is the basis of all ills and that God made man perfect. Upon this assumption, a person who is ill can call a mind healing practitioner on the telephone and, without diagnosis other than a brief description of symptoms, receive an absent treatment for the cure of that ailment. God did make man perfect, but the body is not the man. The body is a chemical laboratory contained within a marvelous, very complex mechanical electrically wired body, which requires a great deal of knowledge to keep it supplied with its necessary foods. No man has precise knowledge of how to operate his own body. That is why it is continually getting out of order. A man may become ill because he gives his body the wrong food or an insufficiency of a necessary food. The resultant illness is due entirely to lack of knowledge of how to operate his body. If he then goes to a mind healer to cure it by the usual practice and techniques, the mind healer asks God to do for that man something which he should do for himself, and no possible good result can come from it. God will work with man, but not for him. And one of the great inconsistencies of mind healers is that they constantly importune God to do for man what man should do for himself. If he has a splinter in his finger, he must pull it out and God will heal it. If he breaks a bone, he must set it in line for God to heal in line. Otherwise, God will heal it as man left it. Mind healers who expect God to do man's part as well as his part leave many cripples to suffer through life. I know a girl who would not go to a medical doctor or surgeon when she broke her ankle. She placed her entire reliance on a mind healing practitioner. Consequently, for years, her ankle has caused her intense pain, and the misplaced bone causes frequent swellings. God did his part, but her refusal to do her part is the cause of making herself a cripple for life. Tying up the broken limb of a fruit tree and setting the broken leg of a man are one in principle, yet man is not condemned for working with God when he ties up the broken limb to its normal position, but he is condemned if he works with God in setting his broken leg. How often we hear healers say that if you have sufficient faith in God, he will do it. It is true that he will do his part, but he will not do man's part. He will heal the broken fruit tree limb, and it will bear fruit even though it hangs to the ground. And he will heal the broken leg even though it stands at a wrong angle and makes a cripple of the man for life. You have undoubtedly seen crippled birds whose legs have been broken and have been healed out of line by God, but you have seen dogs who are similarly crippled, but where man has worked with God and put a splint on the dog's legs, it restores the normal condition and keeps the dog from being a cripple. If you have a splinter in your hand or a dust particle in your eye, or cut an artery or puncture a tire on that extension of your body machine, which is your car, or break a spoke of its wheel, or put your finger on a stove, you may affirm or pray forever in faith and belief that God will work for you and remedy them without action by you, but it will be of no avail. A woman who has a goiter because of drinking glacier water, which lacks iodine, must have iodine given in concentrated form to make up the deficiency. The mind healer condemns that practice on the ground that the ill woman is taking medicine. That is one of the greatest inconsistencies in mind healing practice. They do not condemn a person for eating food, yet all necessary medicine taken to balance body deficits is as much food and meat, and potatoes are food. A mind healer who would treat a goiter by mind healer's technique could not possibly cure that goiter, for God will not do what man should do. A doctor who gave concentrated iodine and cured the goiter would be acting in obedience to God's law, and the mind healer who condemned such a practice would be working against it. The doctor would actually be performing mind healing because he was applying knowledge to the case instead of approaching it with faith, which is not fortified by knowledge. That illogical antipathy to medicine is one of the greatest factors in retarding the growth of mind healing by preventing unity with skilled doctors and surgeons, which would multiply the power of each. A baby whose bones are too soft needs more calcium and vitamins A and D. It must have these or become bow-legged or worse. If a mind healer deeply desires to help that baby, she would give it calcium instead of absent treatments. If it were her own baby, she would be as guilty for not properly feeding her baby as its own mother was. A medical doctor would quickly diagnose the case and give it calcium in larger doses than milk could supply in time to harden its bones properly. It would cure the baby, for the doctor would be fulfilled by the law by working with God. The mind healer would condemn this lawful practice on the ground that the child was taking medicine instead of necessary food to repair a damaged body. If a man has scurvy, it is because he did not give his body enough green vegetables. When a doctor gives the necessary chemicals to a body to make up that food deficiency, he is condemned for giving medicine, but he cures his patient where it would be impossible for a mind healer to help him. God will not set aside his law. He will do his part in working with man, but man must do his part working with God. Mind healers can be a great boon to mankind by dealing with mental attitudes which cause ailments, but where there is no unbalanced mental attitude and they are called upon for what is purely a repair job on a damaged human body or food deficit, they should either make that repair as a garage mechanic would repair an automobile, or work in cooperation with a physician who who knows body structure. There's a tremendous field for mind healers in their own legitimate field. This need is everywhere, but the greatest concentration of that need is in hospitals, on battlefields, and in homes and industries where mental attitudes are obviously the cause of distress. Thousands of lives are being ruined because of unbalanced mental attitudes. Frustrations are driving people to escape from themselves through alcoholism in this gloriously beautiful world of abundance and expressions of love in all things. Thousands of homes need not be broken up if mind healers give loving service to these needs. When a mind healer changes one's mental attitude from discouragement to aspiration by awakening ambition, he is doing to that one what Jesus did in giving a cup of cold water and a kindly word to the wayfarer, or what he meant by the story of the Good Samaritan. When you awaken the light of the Spirit in man by transmuting his anguish to joy, you are reversing the chemistry of his body from the death process to the life process. This is what Jesus did in every healing he has ever made. He made others heal themselves by extending his own balance to them to reverse their destructive body chemistry to a constructive basis. This principle is basic in mind healing. It can be understood by the simple instantaneous mind healings which constantly take place in life, such as the giving of your courage to a discouraged man, or even in making a lonely and frustrated one happy. Everyone knows how the old family doctor's cheerful assurance drove illness out of the window and made the sick one take up his bed and walk. These are mind healings, for they transform one's body processes chemically from death to life. Doctors are themselves practicing mind healing more and more as they discover the healing effects of joy and happiness and their power in restoring normalcy. It is the office of doctors to repair bodies. However, with their skills and knowledge of body structure and the many things which can happen to bodies, it would be an untold blessing to them if mind healers would join with them and effect work upon mental attitudes while they work upon body repairs. If they would do this, the resistance which much of the world has against mind healings would be removed. There is a great deal of justification for this resistance, which would also be removed if mind healers always worked with with physical healers to prevent so many needless deaths due to mind healers who believe that God will do the things for man which man should do for himself. A woman died under the treatment of mind healers who had merely a stoppage of the colon. A nurse could have saved her life in 5 minutes. There was no more reason why God should have performed that purely physical action than that God should have watched her face. God always does his part, but when man desires anything from God and does not follow up his desire by action and doing his part, God will not do his part for him. Wishful thinking is no substitute for cooperative action. Mind healers might take a valuable lesson from Luther Burbank's method of healing a cactus of its thorns. He did it by knowledge, followed by right action. He worked with God, and God worked with him to do it. There was nothing of the faith and belief idea in his method, nor did he spend his time in wishful thinking and expect God to do his part of the work. It may be that too much dependence is placed upon faith and belief instead of knowledge followed by action. It is said that faith and belief could move mountains, but no mountains have ever been removed by faith and belief without knowledge and action. Many mountains have been moved, however, by those who had engineering knowledge and of the skills and techniques of steam shovelers, bulldozers, and explosives. The gravity of this exalted profession demands that those who practice it have the required knowledge to practice it. The clergyman needs years of preparation after he hears the voice of God calling him to serve man. The doctor and the surgeon likewise spend hard and earnest years before taking the responsibility of life and death of other men. Even the genius musician, composer, painter, and sculptor who already have power within them give years of loving preparation to equip themselves to give out the power that is in them. As long as mind healers are attempting to repair damaged body mechanism, they should either have as much knowledge of bodies as doctors and surgeons have, or work in unison with them. It is fundamentally logical that every man must have knowledge of his own particular art or profession. It is as fundamentally illogical for a mind healer to attempt to repair a ruptured artery in a brain by mind healing techniques as it would be to repair a short circuited electrical generator that way. They must realize that God will not change any effects at the request of man as long as their cause continues, yet they accept countless cases where they attempt to cure effects while their patients continue the cause of them. That is as fruitless and futile as praying to God to stop wars while man continues to make wars. That is why more knowledge is necessary than the few months that is required to secure authority to practice mind healing. Lawyers, doctors, engineers, painters, sculptors, musicians, and pilots of planes need years of training and skills and accumulation of knowledge to become proficient in their work. There should be no exception to this rule for so noble a profession as mind healing, which assumes as much responsibility for life and death as the doctor or plane pilot assumes. In other words of deep meaning, no man can give out of himself more power than he has in himself to give it. The entire case for the future of this epochal step in man's spiritual unfolding rests upon this one undebatable fact. Knowledge alone gave Jesus his power. He had the unlimited knowledge of a complete illuminate. The fact that he did not diagnose the condition of a sufferer does not warrant a mind healer from not diagnosing it, for he knew the condition without diagnosis. It would be helpful to the growth of mind healing to relate some of the things which he knew that gave him his power. To demonstrate how much he had to give out of himself, I will tell you 3 things he knew which are unknown even to this day. He knew that there is an entirely different chemical action to the generative electrical pulsation, which polarizes and vitalizes bodies into life, than the chemical reaction of the radioactive pulsation, which depolarizes and devitalizes bodies towards death. He was thoroughly aware of the construction of matter in this curved wave universe. He knew that the multiplication of power to vitalize matter into stronger life was electrically expressed centripetally in the spiral direction of gravity, and that the opposite centrifugal spiral direction led to disappearance and death. Knowing how to obey these 2 opposing processes by living in conformity with them, he could command them to reflect his image in them. He thoroughly comprehended that a reversal of the death process would cause an instantaneous healing of anything which was dying by making it live. He knew the electrical nature of that process, which is a forever turning inside out and outside in series of centrifugal and centripetal interchanges which compress and expand sequentially. His instantaneous healings are proof that he not only knew the process but could command it. He knew that perfect mental and physical balance is impossible without perfect symmetry. There are only 2 perfectly symmetrical forms in nature, the cube and the sphere. All other forms are sections or multiples of these 2 forms. God made the sphere for the physical universe and the cube for the invisible universe, which is divided into wave fields of cubic form. He knew that every normal, healthy body is composed of perfect spheres, and that the symmetry of those spheres is controlled by the polarity of invisible cubic wave fields. A human body is composed of countless billions of spheres, as perfect in shape as our sun is perfect, if the body is vital and alive. If the body becomes devitalized, these spheres begin to flatten like our earth, which has begun to die. When that happens, the chemistry of death reverses the chemistry of life. The symmetry of the sphere begins to change to the symmetry of the spheroid and the ellipse. The cube symmetry, which controls the sphere, now lengthens gradually until the cube entirely flattens and disappears into the zero stillness of its birth. When that happens, the chemistry of death takes over from the chemistry of life. Cube symmetry is no longer possible. That means that the billions of spheres which comprise a vital body begins to flatten and wobble on their axis like dying tops. His knowledge of such processes in the construction of living and dying matter gave him the power to extend his own balance to the unbalanced one and reverse his polarity from the direction of death to the direction of life. He did this by becoming one in mind with the one he healed. He who was ill thus healed himself. No one can heal another. He can but make the other heal himself by reversing his thinking. Jesus had the full range of extrasensory perception. He did not need to diagnose a case for that reason. He thoroughly knew the nature of the ailment and its cause without questioning the ailing one for symptoms. Better than the most skilled doctor could ascertain them by the many methods used for that purpose. He could diagnose an ailment of a person at a distance, even though he had never known him, as well as though the man were present. Moreover, he knew the thoughts of anyone, anywhere upon whom he might focus. There has been one case of extrasensory perception in recent human history of a man who could diagnose symptoms of ailments of distant, unknown people, but during the periods of such diagnosis, the normal sense range was sacrificed to make the extended range possible. This man was Edward Casey of Virginia. Hundreds of names and addresses of men in different cities were given to him. In each case, he severed his seat of sensation from his consciousness sufficiently to project his conscious awareness to that person and dictate a complete analysis of the ailment. In every case, the diagnosis he gave was found to be accurate. Some may have been incomplete, but that which he gave was always accurate. The condition he was in while losing a personal sense of existence was what is known as the trance state. The knowledge which Jesus had, as partially given above, will someday be taught in the schools which graduate those who desire to emulate Jesus. It is necessary knowledge to have in order to perform such seemingly miraculous healings as those he made. To the best of one's ability, one should acquire as much knowledge as possible of God and his ways and processes of creation under his mind control. An earnest application of whatever knowledge one can acquire, however, will make it possible to make marvelous healings of such a nature that one may fully comprehend the cause as well as the effect. Man should be taught what he should do for himself. God will work with a man who desires a potato crop by using all the power of his universe in growing and ripening the seeds which man puts into the earth, but God will not put the seed into the earth. Every service which man gives in planting the seed and cultivating the soil, God will match equally by making the seed grow into fruition. Man must thus work with God in the care of his own body. He must provide food for his body, put it into his mouth, and masticate it. God will supply the mechanism for digesting it and converting it to blood, but he will not do both. Likewise, man must do everything which is physical effort to take care of the body mechanism by nourishing it, cleaning it, giving it necessary exercise, and repairing it. God will do his part of the healing of wounds, digestion of food, and other creative necessities of growth, but he will not fill one's teeth, wash one's face, make eyeglasses for him, set his broken bones, or any such service that man should do for himself. It is readily understandable, though, how commonly this fundamental is ignored by people who expect that God will do both parts. I feel that this new spiritual unfolding is still so new that many more things should be explained which are extraneous to the purpose of this book, but the mystery of what is known as instantaneous healings should be more succinctly clarified, lest the lack of understanding may lead to believing that it means that cancer or leprous scales will immediately drop off the body if they are instantly healed. When any foreign body which is living upon the dying flesh of a living man is destroyed by reversing the chemistry of the man, nature gradually eliminates the dead particles. It takes time to grow them off in the reverse process of their growing on. They are no longer living, however, and can no longer be nourished by man's body. All changes in nature follow the process of integration and disintegration by the motion picture technique of projecting one changing picture after another into a living body to integrate it or into space to disintegrate it. The time element is as imperative one way as the other. Scales on a tree are a more familiar example. When the tree is sprayed, the chemistry of the scales is reversed instantly, but it may take weeks for the scales to disappear. This explains instantaneous healings in bodies which are damaged by other than their own normal growths. If the mind healer understands the conditions, he can command that abnormal body to disappear by changing the attitude of mind of the patient so that he can heal himself if there is time left to do it. Even though an instantaneous healing can take place, the body can eliminate just so much and no more. The surgeon should then remove it, but how often, he will say, if he had only come 2 years ago, this operation would not have been necessary. As a contrast to this kind of healing, where a surgeon should cooperate with the practitioner, I will describe an instantaneous healing where a man was near death without having any indiscernible physical ailment. As a precedent to this story, I repeat 2 salient facts which apply to all such healings. 1. A man becomes what he thinks. He is constantly remaking himself into his own image. This means exactly what it says. Every thought and action from one moment to the next is instantly recorded upon his body and changes it constantly to the pattern of every changing mental attitude. A joyful attitude of mind brings a smile to one's face to tell the world of the change 2 minutes before, when he may have had an impatient or even angry attitude. Every changing attitude of mind immediately affects the chemistry of his body. It simultaneously starts to work, changing the man's body to conform to his own changing image. 2. Every man can command matter in the measure of his ability to obey the laws governing the construction of matter. This also means exactly what it says. Our power is limited to our knowledge of the source of power and the law governing the balanced interchange between the 2 expressions of that power. It means also that we can extend our own power to others in the measure that we have it to give, and in the limited measure of their desire to have what we have to give. To command matter means to reflect our power to it so that it reflects our image in it. It then becomes what we think as we become what we think. And now for the story which demonstrates the above principles. A surgeon told a patient that he would surely die unless he was operated upon within a year, and even then he could give but little assurance that he could survive the operation. If you think I might die by the operation, and I have about a year to live, and as you mentioned your belief in prayer, do you think that I would have a chance to live if I prayed? The patient asked. I am more and more inclined to believe that you could if you know how to pray. Many of us doctors and surgeons see so many things happen to patients whom we give up that we are beginning to feel that there is much beyond our physical bodies which we do not understand. I will tell you of one of my own cases. I had a man patient who was so near death that we expected it hourly. What is more, he did not seem to want to live, for he gave every symptom of being in utter despair. He had not touched food for 3 days, and when he last tried, he could not keep it down. Then a strange thing happened. A woman came in and cried over him and went away. 2 hours later, the dying man sat up in bed and asked for food. What miracle is this? I asked him. It is no miracle at all, he replied in a strong voice. My wife wants me to live, says she loves me and will come back to me if I will live. So now I want to live. Until now, I wanted to die. I have seen so many things like that happen to those we doctors have given up that I suggested it to you, whom I had also given up. I told you also that you must know how to pray, although this man did not pray, nor did his wife pray, or at least I did not see her pray. When she left, however, he became instantly reborn to life instead of being close to death. I believe that the power of love was at the bottom of it somehow. While he was in despair, he was really an ill man. He was a very ill man, but hope and happiness made him well instantly. We have no medicine or process which will do that. I cannot understand it. I would have given much to be able to comprehend what really happened. What actually happened was that the wife transferred the love which was in balance in her to her husband to restore his balance, therefore reversing his desire to die to a desire to live. This immediately caused a reversal of his body chemistry, which always builds a body in the image of the thinker. This is the underlying principle of all Jesus' healings, for he made others to heal themselves by extending his balance to them. Love is a moment-to-moment wordless prayer, for it is desire expressed in silent communication with God. Desire of mind is the only energy in the universe. Desire to live is manifested in motion by the polarizing force of vitalized action. Desire for rest from action is equally strong, however, and is manifested by cessation of action. That is what we so erroneously think of as death. There is no death in God's living universe. There is naught but life in action, and also in the rest, which man calls death. All right, friends, that's it for today.